Hey guys, this is taking advantage of a water break. This is my second attempt here at trying to do the morning video from last night's encounter. And I apologize that I'm just kind of winging it as I go. Man, I had like 9 chins today. The shadows are awful. Put that up high, man. I'll just hold it. It's easier. Man, I look like I just lost 35 pounds. Anyway, so Thursday, what an event. A lot to talk about. The book will never do it justice. So I mentioned some of my day videos yesterday how I met or came to be at the care of Pastor Gregg and his wife Samantha. 24 hours early, he hadn't known me. A friend who's been helping me along the journey here, reaching out to folks in front of me, it's suggested I give him a call. What I'm going to tell you is kind of is amazing in this day and age, and it'll be even more amazing when I finish this video if I get it done in time. That Pastor King and his wife don't even have internet at home. So imagine you get this phone call one day from some guy that says, hey, my name's Jim Smith, first of all, if that doesn't sound hokey enough. I'm walking across America, and someone gave me your name and thought you might be able to help me out, and maybe I'm just looking for a place to lay my head at night, and maybe you know somebody through your ministry or something like that. So he got that message, he called me up, and that's just kind of sort of amazing in its own right, how many people actually return phone calls, especially one of that nature. And he asked me some questions, at first maybe even being a little bit skeptical, but when I told him, he said, look, come on over, I won't be there during the daytime, my wife and I would love to meet you. We'll put a note on the front pew in front of the one building and kind of give you directions where to go and what to do. So I got there in Dunkirk, not Dunkirk, Ohio, and sure enough there was a note, and I got to the campground, and Pastor had put out a cot for me, opened up the showers and turned on the water. He had toiletries, a giant, warm, fluffy towel, washcloth. There was a book there for me that I got engrossed in. I didn't quite finish it yet. So Pastor, I took it with me. I thought you'd want me to finish it. I promise you I will return it to you. And I came later on and found there's a little bag of groceries there for me and soup, and I assume they left the door open for the kitchen, and so much to tell. So the night before I'd only had about an hour and a half sleep. So when I got there I was pretty wiped out. I showered and I actually passed out for an hour or two. And I got up and I started reading this book, and rain came, and not long thereafter Pastor and his wife came, and I heard them pulling up and I went out to greet them. And they came just from work. These are just very salt of the earth, ordinary folks. I think, I didn't ask, but I'm thinking they have a painting business, home painting. They were kind of covered in paint, and he came in and met me and asked if all the accommodations were fine, and of course they were. I'm pretty low maintenance, and they were more than fine. And we talked for a little while. They went out, they hadn't eaten, so they got something to eat. They brought me back a sandwich, and we just sat out back and talked for quite a while. And it's the talk that I wanted to share with you guys. Some of it was really inspirational, some of it was meaningful to me, and some of it was shake your head, you know, almost bizarre, not because of them. So Pastor and Samantha, I didn't ask specifically, but I gather that this is at least Samantha's second marriage, and they married, and they had their home, and they were caretakers to this campground, and it was in, you know, disrepair, and Pastor worked in a warehouse. I want to say an assembly line. I might not be completely factually correct about that, but he worked in a factory, assembly line, warehouse, something of that nature. Apparently been doing it for 30 years. And Samantha is definitely an idea person, and she was kind of telling him, look, why don't we do something with the campground? Why don't we renovate this and redo that, and I can turn it into this, and I can make it a craft place for the kids in the town. And you know, he would matter-of-factly say, you know, no, I'm not really up for that. I've been working pretty hard, and I got the ministry, and I got a lot going on. I'm really not up for that. And it got to the point where they both said it was really putting the actual stress on the relationship, because she would bring it up so frequently, and he just wasn't ready to do it. And then this next bit of talk I'm going to have was something that, you know, again, it depends on your faith, I guess. But certainly she believed. And one day she was in her kitchen, and she was reading her Bible, and she was kind of cursing her husband for not grabbing the idea. And she says she was almost empowered to her face placed into the Bible, and brought to scripture, and heard her voice saying, you know, you can't force somebody to do it. Things will come in their own time. And you know, he's a servant of mine, and you can't talk about him like that. And I'm paraphrasing, so I'm going to have it accurately, word for word. But it was at that point her eyes opened up and she said, okay, maybe I need to back off of this a little bit. So she did. And it was funny because she said, I thought I could say anything to God and however I wanted to and curse him, but apparently he stepped up and had his back a little bit in this one. So anyway, so she dropped the subject and let it go for a while. And then all of a sudden, one day out of nowhere, Gregg came home and said to her, hey, hon, what if I knocked down that wall? Apparently, raccoons and such had taken up home, and they said there was, about, foot deep of raccoon crud all over the place. And maybe if I take that wall down and put this up, we can get the raccoons out, I can clean it up, and we can start working on this thing. And she was obviously so excited and so happy about it. So, and as they started to do that, they started to work on other parts of the campground. And they were just caretakers of the property and the land out of their own free time. They weren't getting paid for it or anything like that. Just something they were willing to do out of the goodness of their heart. So, as the story goes, they start working on the campground, and the campground had property that was owned by somebody else. And the mother, I think, that owned it, had been a parishioner of the pastor, and left it to her family. And her family approached the pastor and said, hey, listen, would you guys like to purchase the land that the campground sits on? And the pastor and his wife said, look, we'd probably love to, but we're just not in a position to do that, and thanks for offering, but we can't really do that. And they just kept going on doing what they were doing. Well, sure enough, as fate would have it, they got a call one day from the son of the daughter and said, listen, our mom would have wanted you to have this. Really doesn't do you any good to have the campground structures without the land, so we're just going to give you the 9 acres. So again, here, without asking for a dime from anybody, the pastor and his wife were able to take ownership of the land. And the next beautiful part about that is, well, these aren't, 4-star, Hilton hotels. They're, it's buildings and requires maintenance and upkeep and electricity, water, stuff like that. Well, on those 9 acres that they were given was some farmland, and they were able to basically lease out that farmland to somebody. So the money from that farmland that the farmer's farming now subsidizes the bills for the campground. So it's a wash. So here, 2 great folks did something, amazing happen to them. But then the story gets even better. So Samantha had events at the campground and hosts craft parties for the kids and things like that, has a Bible school there. But she always had this vision of having, she thinks every town should have a thrift store and a community center to bring the family together. It bothers her that, a lot of times neighbors are less than neighborly, and there's reasons for that, and valid reasons, but, again, we've all kind of drifted off to our own little world. So she always had this vision. Well, one day in town, I guess, if I understand the story correctly, there was a funeral home that was kind of going out of business, and they approached the pastor and his wife and said, would you, like to buy the building? We're going to be closing up. And Samantha's first reaction was to pray and say, no, you can't, we need you. And the story goes, the funeral director grabbed her by the shoulders and said, are you really praying for people to die to keep us in business? So it was kind of a humorous twist to that. But so again, the pastor basically said the same thing. Look, love the idea, but we're not in a position financially to be able to do that. So so they went ahead and passed on the idea. And sure enough, right before Christmas of the following year, they get a phone call from the building owner. And again, I'm not sure if I have this exactly correct, but basically said, look, you've had these dreams. The building is kind of, if it's running vacant, isn't going to be well maintained. You have access to it as long as you're willing to maintain it for us. You guys can have a community center and your thrift store. I know my building will be maintained, and so it'll be worth something to me when the time comes and I do have to sell it. And they get their community center and thrift shop. So here's another windfall that came their way. They didn't ask for it, they didn't expect it, and just people taking care of people, God working in mysterious ways, fate, karma, again, however you want to phrase it, just another beautiful thing. So now they're able to do that. So then here's kind of a really cool story. So those are the stories I want to share, but then this is really, really bizarre. Bear in mind, the pastor and his wife don't even have the internet in this generation, which in one way, I admire them so wholeheartedly for. And another way, there are so many conveniences of the internet that it's, and I am holding, so this shakes back and forth, I apologize. I'm not trying to get you dizzy. But in this day and age, there's so many conveniences of the internet, to not have it is almost unheard of to me anyway. But so they don't have the internet. Well, one day the pastor is preparing for his sermon at their little one-room church out in the fields of Dunkirk, Ohio, when these gentlemen come walking in that didn't seem quite like they belonged, you know, carrying satchels and cameras and microphones, and they come out and they identify themselves as reporters from the BBC, which is the British Broadcasting Company. Now, to those of you that don't know, the BBC is probably the most televised television program throughout the world. You know, not here in America, but all of these smaller countries, if you ever travel, you're in a hotel, 90% of them are televised in BBC News. So I'm not quite sure how it came to be, but the BBC, there was an article, here's how it came to be. There was an article in the London Times, maybe, one of the large London papers, that there's a Dunkirk, England and a Dunkirk, Ohio, and they kind of did this little playoff on sister cities, so to speak. And there's a BBC office in Washington, but these folks came in from England and wanted to get to know. They walked around town and, you know, who should we know? We want to learn about Dunkirk, Ohio, and the town folk pointed them to the pastor. So here these guys walk in, cameras and microphones in this little church, and said, "Pastor, we'd love to kind of video your sermon and introduce who they were and get to know you a little bit." And so he said, "Sure." So they hooked up microphones and the whole bit, and he gave his sermon. And he said they spoke with him for a couple of hours thereafter, and he kind of got on the BBC somehow. And again, what's so ironic about that is here's a guy that doesn't even have the internet, right? But so humble, and so it was just a crazy story. And it gets even better than that. So two more things. So I've come to find this out myself, that when one newspaper or news organization carries something, others want to too. So all of a sudden one day he's at a pig roast. Him and his wife are at a pig roast for the town. And then comes some woman walking in with cameras and a reporter. A reporter from the LA Times flew in and went to Dunkirk, Ohio just to meet these folks after reading about their story in the London Times. So, you know, here he is again, this little fella from Dunkirk, Ohio, you know, handling London Times, LA Times. It's kind of crazy when you think about it. And then lastly, this is kind of a funny story too before I wrap up here. So a couple years ago, we had this incredible deep freeze come across the Midwest and the East, and you know, that's newsworthy around the world to some degree. So the BBC was covered it. Well, the BBC, I believe his name's Peter Foster, editor or producer, whatever, said, "Well, who are we going to go to in America?" They called up Pastor Gregg. So Samantha gets it on the phone one day and says, "Honey, it's for you." And he hears him talking about things like, "Yeah, I knocked some icicles off, and I had to go help a neighbor plow some things." And you know, she's like, "What was that about?" Well, the BBC wanted to get some information about the deep freeze we're going through. So without even knowing it, without even asking for it, Pastor King has become, you know, the spokesperson for America to the BBC, which I just think is such a cool story. And then, of course, here I come traipsing through on some random note. So he thinks, you know, they're shaking their head going, you know, what is this about us that these people just reach out to us and so forth. So kind of a great story. Their hospitality was amazing. Just great folks. I gave them my card. They're going to hopefully get on my side a little bit and have some people show them, because I want to recognize them and what they did. I have friends for life. I can't wait. What they did with the campground, I won't even go into now, but they get this campground and they host parties and revivals and stuff for kids. And I really can't wait to bring my kids out there and spend a day or two with them and out in the area. And I really can, and it'll be a great time. So I love you, Pastor. I love you, Samantha. I love you, my kids. All you people following me, I hope you enjoyed some of these videos and some of the people. I hope you get to meet some of these people along the way. I'm asking Toby and Adam, my two go-to guys for my website, to find those links. Adam already did. I'm going to ask Toby to kind of link them up to my website, so you guys can go on the website and maybe see some of the links of Pastor King and so forth. So thanks, guys. Have a great day. Love you. Kira. Oh, let me go. I lost pronouncing Kira. Love you, baby girl. Landon, you're the best. Who's better than you? Nobody I know. Grace, I know you were down in Carolina visiting UNC. As I've told you, Villanova's blue as well, and we actually win basketball games and championships. So I love you guys. Take care now.